Black power, y'all. Come on in the room. I don't know why I can't pin the comments, y'all, but they are in the links or in the comments. The links are in the comments is what I'm trying to say. But good morning, Black Power. Come on in the room. I don't know why I can't pin the links, but they are there as far as donation links, how to become a member, all of that good jazz. So when you come in the room, make sure you share it. Hashtag share when you shared it. Share it in all your groups, on all your social media platforms. But I am looking forward to spending this next hour and change with you to go over these next few chapters in the revolutionary suicide. We're actually nearing the end of the book. This has been a really powerful read, y'all. I have really thoroughly enjoyed this. This was my first time reading through this book, and I definitely intend to go back in and read it again for a lot of things, because I think I read somewhere that you read a book, I think you might obtain like 10% of what you actually read. So I definitely will be going back and reading this again. I hope you guys have enjoyed it as much as I have. Black Power Robert, thank you for joining. Make sure you share it on all your social media platforms, comrade, and invite somebody that's never watched with us to watch it. I'll wait for a few more seconds to see if other people want to come in and join us, because there's a lot of information a lot of material to go over and to discuss. And I really hope that I get a lot of participation and feedback from my comrades and from people who just love to read good revolutionary literature like this. So as you can see, I am here by myself. My comrade had a plantation contradiction, but that's the world of colonialism, and that's why we're trying to do away with it. So today it'll just be me. Hopefully my comrade will be back next week, because we do have an announcement around the next book that we will be reading, and it's going to be a good one. I've never read this book either, but I'm excited to announce that we're going to be reading it. So yeah, come on in and share on all your groups, platforms. I did Black Power. Nyah, what's up? What's going on with you? Nyah, if you could share, make sure you share it, comrade. We really want to get this information out there to the masses. I did post some links in the description, in the comments, but I'm not able to pin it for some reason. So I don't know if there's another Black Hammer admin that can do that. If you can, that would be great. But for whatever reason, I'm not able to pin it. Before I get started, I want to share some. Well, the links are in the comment section. But please donate. The book club serves as a fundraiser for the organization. So if you're able to donate, even just no amount is too small, you can donate at BHBookclub, $BHBookclub. You can also go to GoFundMe.com /BlackHammerOrg. You can also go directly to our website and donate there at www.blackhammer.org /donate. So any of those places you can donate. I do have a couple of announcements I want to go over. Black Power Chakande. Thank you for sharing, Chakande, and make sure you share on all your platforms. All comrades joining in this morning, if you can share on all your pages and all your platforms, that would be great. But we do have a couple of announcements before we get started. There's a couple of food drives that are coming up. One is going to be on November the 17th in the Wilmington, Delaware area. So if you're in that area and you want to help out with handing out food, please hit us up. We do have an event created for that particular event. We have an event on Facebook, so you can go and say that you're interested. You could also go on there, and there are links there where you can donate. So we would love donations to help us to get the food out there. We'd also like forces to come in and help us to give out the food. So that's November the 17th in the Wilmington, Delaware area. We also have a food drive happening in the Atlanta area. It's going to be the Saturday following the Colonial Thanksgiving holiday. So that is November the 30th. We will be meeting up at Central Park, and we will be handing out as much food as we possibly can to serve the community. So if you're in the Atlanta area and you want to help us, hit us up there. We also have an event on Facebook for that. You can also comment, let us know that you want to donate. We are taking donations for that particular food drive at the Black Hammer Org Cash App, so you can send funds there and you can donate there. But if you're in the Atlanta area, we would love to have more forces to come out to help us to hand out the food as well. So hit us up, let us know that you're interested. We do have an event and a flyer that's circulating, and we really want people to help us out. And then also the Protect Our Girls campaign has a protest going on November the 18th. So we're going to be going to the Decatur City Municipal Courthouse. So if you want to go with us, if you want to help us to get petitions, if you want to sign the petition, you should. We have an event created on Facebook for that as well. My comrade Muhammadu Jain heads up that committee, so we need forces for that. We've got 2 little girls we're trying to help get out of a really bad situation, so donations to help the family to raise funds for that. We also need people to help us to get petitions signed, so if you want to get involved with that, let us know that as well. You can comment here, and we will make sure that we get in contact with you. So Black Power, that's all the announcements. With that being said, I'm going to go ahead and get started. I do want to start it off with what's on your bookshelf. I try to stay consistent with that. So if you've got something that you're reading right now that you want us to add to our reading list, and something you'd like us to really get into, so long as it's around revolution and us getting free as African and colonized people, let us know what that is. Just hashtag what's on your bookshelf. Let us know, and then we'll see if it'd be something we can add to our reading list. So with that being said, I will go ahead and get started. So we read a little chunk last time. We're going into not chapter 6, but part 6 of the book, and this is actually the final section of the book. But we covered chapters 28 through 30. Let me start off by reading the introduction to part 6. It says, there is an old African saying, I am we. If you met an African in ancient times and asked him who he was, he would reply, I am we. This is revolutionary suicide. I, we, all of us are the one and the multitude. So I thought that was pretty deep, because that's the mindset you really have to have in order to come into revolutionary life. You really have to understand that this is bigger than just you. You are no one without everyone that made you to be who you are in the first place. So a sense of community, a sense of communalism, a sense of, I'm nothing without the people. That's what that quote said to me. So I don't know what it said to you, but I'd love to hear it. So if you have any hashtag read that backs from this section, go ahead and put it in the comment section, because I definitely, again, want to encourage participation in what you guys got out of the chapter as well, not just, me putting out there what I read and what I got out of it. So give me just a second, because I want to follow along with the live so that I can go read your comments. Give me just 10 seconds, y'all, to get the live up on my laptop. Here we go. So I hope you guys ate something good this morning. I hope you guys got your tea ready. All right, here we go. All right, Black Power John. I hope I'm saying your name right. Black Power Muhammadu thank you guys for sharing. And so I'll do my best to catch your catch your comments while I'm going through. But yeah, so we're starting out in chapter 28. It's about the release of Huey Newton after he's been in prison. I think he said for some 30-something months. And so I'm going to tell you up front, the things that stood out to me the most was how locked away this comrade had been, to the point where just being out and in the open, it was like he would get overloaded by seeing people and colors and just things that he had not seen in as long as he had seen it. But I mean, that was some things that stood out to me, just how locked away and what prison aims to do to the average person. Black Power, I'm sorry if I say your name wrong. Adebio. I'm so sorry if I'm butchering your name, but Black Power to you. I'm glad you could join us this morning. But yeah, so yeah, Huey gets out. But not really out in the beginning, because he has to go for a sentencing. Well, he has to go for a bail hearing, I guess. I could be saying that wrong. But anyway, so he's getting out. They still have him chained up. The ride is a long one from going back to Oakland from where he was incarcerated. So, they still chain him up and load him up in the car. And even that, he said he hadn't been in the automobile in 22 months. And he just said it felt so strange to be driving at 80 miles an hour down the highway. So that was like, wow, just think, taking something like that for granted, being in a car, something that so many of us do every day without even really thinking about it. Even those of us who say we're revolutionary, we take those types of things for granted, or at least I know I do. So they're driving back to Alameda County, which is Oakland. And let's see, I made some notes here. It said the release was being carried out due to the and yeah, this is the case. So the release is happening because he was technically, what we talked about in the last discussion we had was there was a technicality that the jury was not informed that there was a difference between the involuntary manslaughter charge and involuntary and voluntary manslaughter. There's a difference between the two. And so he's getting out, and bail can be posted for that, or bail is allowed to be set for that. And then he's going to be tried again for manslaughter. He hasn't really seen the light of day in over a year. And, I think I made a note on page 298 at the bottom. Something that stood out to me was, as he said, most people take these stimuli for granted, but after 2 years in a restricted and monotonous environment, it is impossible to absorb what you see. We pass houses, fields, farm laborers, animals, and all sorts of sights grown dim in my memory. The mountains in the distance, the sky, the movements of life. I wanted them all at once, but I could not handle it. It disturbed me. And that to me is like sensory overload. And something else too that I think he had mentioned before in a previous chapter when he was incarcerated was, when you're isolated or put in isolation or solitary, you're really backed away from everybody, where you have minimal to sometimes no interaction with another human being for a long period of time. And to the point where you almost forget how to interact with another human being when the time comes for you to. And that's not necessarily done on accident either, but that is what happens. Like you forget words, you forget words that you use on an everyday basis. It becomes harder for you to articulate or to have an actual discussion with another person when you have purposely been held and kept away from everybody else. So, Black Power Daniel, thank you for joining. Make sure you share in all your groups and on all your social media platforms to make sure that we get this out there. Share the links anywhere you can. But I really appreciate y'all tuning in this morning. But I thought that was pretty profound to read, is that, when you get out after you've been locked away, even for, there are people that have been locked away for decades. And And, as far as that's concerned, it's just when you get out and you see all these things you haven't seen, the outside of a building, just think about how how much you would see that. It would almost be like a person who, I know there's studies and things out there where, somebody who's deaf or who has pretty much 95% hearing loss, when they're able to hear for the first time, it's almost like the brain doesn't know what to do with those new sensations because it's not used to processing information. It's not used to processing sound. So seeing that or hearing for the first time or seeing something for the first time, if you've been blind, is overwhelming. So it's kind of equate that to this. So when he returns to Oakland, he said that, at the bottom, I'm reading at the bottom of page 299, at the top of page 300, he said, now a few people were on the street, and they arrived back in Oakland around 7 a.m., how colorful their clothes seemed. And this is what I mean by being bombarded with overwhelming amount of stimuli all at once. I could not get a clear impression of any one thing. Anything tended to blur and become indistinct. The whole experience was devastating. Where I've been for 33 months, everyone wore the same clothes, did the same things, and went the same place every day. You never wondered where people were going or what they were doing. On any day, all you expected to happen was what had happened the day before and the day before that. In my first few days outside the jail, I had to make an attempt to remain calm, to keep the action and unpredictability from exciting my nervous system. That's a real thing. Because that's what sensory overload is. It's like just the shock almost to your nervous system. Even the sight of ordinary activities such as cars stopping for traffic lights, some going in one direction and some in another, people in the street, was just all too much. So I thought that was, like I said, pretty profound. It's just the fact that he had been locked away for that long, and what just being out, and you're not even totally free yet, but just out and being able to see all these things, what it does, what the brain is able to do with that. Again, if you have hashtag read that backs, go ahead and put them in the comment section so we can discuss what you guys got out of the chapter. I'd love to hear what you guys have to think about it. So they arrive back at the Alameda County Jail. He's still shackled. He has to go back through the whole probing thing all over again. And it's not long before things start popping off again with the officers there. He runs into an old officer that he had a run-in with in the past. He couldn't place him at first, and then he's able to place where he did see him when he was locked up before. Yeah. So then there's another comrade, a couple of other comrades that Huey remembered forming a relationship with. One guy was somebody named Nice Man, and it's been a while since Huey has been here, but this guy's still there, and he's, I guess, helping. What do they call him? Basically, he's made some sort of rank where he helps to give out the food and stuff like that during meal times. And then there's another guy, a white guy, that Huey had formed a relationship with named McPherson, which he was in between. There was something that they called between Little Death Row and Death Row, something about the trial. He had not yet gotten the trial to, I guess, determine his sentencing. So he's there, and he's there for murdering somebody by stabbing him with a pencil in his eye. And basically they determined that he was, I think they were trying to get it thrown out because he was what do they call it? When you're not sane enough to withstand trial. So then Huey is here again because they're trying to determine his bail, and what it was going to take to get him out. So they were thinking that his bail was going to be somewhere around the $100,000, and of course you have to come up with 10% of that. So $10,000 would be what the cost for him to actually walk out, if that's what they were to set it out. Jensen, being the prosecutor, is still involved because they have to determine what the bail is going to be. The bail ended up being $50,000, and so they had to come up with $5,000. And of course, they end up not, the money was raised by the party. It all ended up being raised by the party to get Huey out. I thought it was something important on here where they talked about, on page 304 at the bottom, there's a footnote here that mentions the, I'm trying to find what let's see where it is. Okay, here it is. So what they're talking about, when he has a meeting with his attorneys before the bail is actually set, it says, my attorneys reminded him that in cases like mine, where a person has a reputation for showing up in court, bail is usually never higher than $5,000. Although Jensen agreed, he said he would have to set a higher bail because I had already been convicted, and because of the seriousness of the matter, and because Eldridge Cleaver had jumped bail. So Eldridge Cleaver had done this in the past. So I guess with the reputation of the Black Panthers and anybody associated with the movement, they weren't going to go with a lower bail. It says my lawyers would agree to something like $10,000. Although they felt that amount was too high, the negotiations took place. So there's a note about the whole jumping bail historical fact, and it's at the bottom of page 304 if you're able to follow along with me. After April 6, 1968 ambush of the Black Panthers by the police, which Bobby Hutton died, Eldridge Cleaver was sent to Vacaville Prison by the California Adult Authority for parole violations and other charges. He remained there for 2 months. Charles Gary petitioned for a writ of habeas corpus in the court of Solano County Superior Court Judge Raymond Sherwin, who reversed the Adult Authority order on September 27, 1968. Judge Sherwin noted that Cleaver's parole had been revoked without a hearing and that no proof had been supplied to support the charges brought against him. Cleaver was released on $50,000 bail, and the Adult Authority immediately began moves to have Judge Sherwin's ruling reversed by the California Appellate Court. Both the Appellate Court and the State Superior Court agreed with the Adult Authority's decision to revoke parole, and Cleaver was ordered returned to jail on November 27, 1968. He failed to appear and fled first to Cuba and later to Algeria. And I don't think he ever came back from Algeria. So that's kind of the whole story of how Eldridge Cleaver ended up in Algeria, and I thought that was important to read here, especially given the events that are going to come later that we'll read about, that type of thing. And so, yeah, that was important to read. And then, let's see here. It was something else. Let's see. Nice man. Okay. So, yeah, and then we go into Huey's there for a very short period of time. And, of course, the conditions of the prison really haven't changed. The food is still horrible. The cells and the prison itself is dirty. So that's, but Huey's also understanding that he's really not going to be there that long. And so he was just saying that really a whole lot hasn't changed. The treatment of the inmates hadn't changed. So he goes into Nice Man's duties to pass out the food. And then there's a conflict that happens around that where they're still, I guess, shoving the plates underneath the door. And it just, when I was reading it, it just made me think how disgusting it was, because when you slide under the door, everybody knows there's like dust, crud, grime that builds up under the door, especially in a prison. And, they're sliding these plates under the door, which a lot of times will rub up, up against the bottom of the door, and whatever is on the grime that's on the bottom of the door basically falls in your food. So, Nice Man actually refused to do that, and he was just, he said he didn't want to do that because, it's dirty, it's disgusting, and I'd rather hand this person so then the conflict starts up from that, and Nice Man basically refuses to do that, and he ends up getting displaced as a result of this confrontation. So it says on page 306, now it escalated. Every time the cop said something, Nice Man replied. Sliding the food under the door was no longer the subject. It was just an angry argument heavy with insults. I tried again to get Nice Man to stop arguing, but he would not. So Something that stands out to me here, and then some of the other things, is Huey several times has used the logic that, while yes, we resist as African and colonized people, there's kind of a strategic way to go about doing it. And I guess in this situation, he had advised this guy not to argue with because it really wasn't going to change the situation, and based on what was going to end up happening, it really wasn't worth it. He knew he wasn't going to be there much longer to really, I guess, help organize these people, and he did not feel that it was necessary to go down this path in this manner. So but I've noticed that about Huey a few times, that he's been like, rather than the community reacting in a righteous way, I don't know if that's a word, but not righteous, but a riotous way, he's advised the public and the community to stand back or fall back until it's necessary to do so. So it's just, that's an observation that I had about Huey, is that it just seems like, before, it just seemed to me like, even like the difference between him and Eldridge Cleaver was more so about agitating people to the point of being reactionary and saying, well, we're going to do this, since they did this, we're going to riot, we're going to tear shit up, or excuse my language, we're going to tear some stuff up. But then Huey would be like, well, we're only going to do that we're only going to do that if, it's going to get some other outcome that we're actually trying to do. So it's like a strategy is behind the action. So I think here, since he knew that this really wasn't going to go anywhere, it wasn't going to change anything, then it really wasn't strategic to really do anything or to argue. He ends up getting they somehow blamed Huey for how all this happened. They felt like that this conflict had happened because of Huey's being here. He didn't feel like the inmates would have stood up for themselves or resisted had it not been for Huey's presence. And so they reacted to that. Says they had actually scheduled him on page 308 to go to Little Death Row, which was the hospital health tank where people were, I guess, evaluated to see if they could stand trial and that type of thing. But they called it Little Death Row. Because people that came here usually were here being evaluated because they had like pretty serious criminal charges, murder charges, things of that sort. So yeah. Anybody got any hashtag read that back? I would love to read what you guys got out of this chapter. Hold on, y'all. I'm trying to see if I can see your notes. Oh, okay. Yeah, Daniel says that his read that back is when he came out of the jail when he felt overloaded by stimuli. And yeah, that stood out to me a lot too, comrade, because again, this being locked away even for the, and that's not a short time. 33 months is not a short time. That's 2.5 years. And so if you are somebody who has not seen the light of day for that long, and then all of a sudden you're released to family members, people you don't know. I mean, like I said, the insides of a prison are dull, bland colors, and that does something to the way your brain is able to make sense of what it sees every day. And so when you go from this horrible condition of a place to the outside world, and you see it's just your brain really does not know what to do with all of that, and it's really hard to shut off. Sorry, y'all. Well, I still see y'all, but I just clicked out of the live by mistake, and I really want to make sure I can see your comments. Okay. All right, y'all. Yeah, so any other comments you have for this chapter, I would love to hear what you have to say. On page 309, this is something that I put as my read that back. It said, I had accepted little death row as a thing to be dealt with, but now I would be on the streets in a few hours while the others might never walk out. Knowing I could do little for them left me feeling like an outsider and also privileged, and I never liked to feel privileged, but they all wish me luck. I bedded down for the night, and these things going around in my mind, knowing it was the last night I would spend in jail for some time. It had been a long day, and I rested well. I think, and as colonized people, we tend to, some of us, we do know that we're in a more privileged position than some of the rest of us are. And Black Power, right? And so I made a note of that because I know there's been times where I felt like, I've been in a privileged situation compared to some of my comrades or some just people that I know in general, and it doesn't feel right. It feels like if I have what I have, or if I'm able to do this, this isn't right because other comrades are not able to do this, or they're not able to get access to food and the basic needs, but somehow I'm able to do that. And then a lot of us in this community, we have justified that in saying, well, I worked hard, or I do this, and this is why I have what I have. I didn't get this by just being lazy like they did, or like these other people did. That's why I have what I have. That's what I have. And it just rang true for me because it's just something that, when you feel privileged and what that means, it means that you do not, you recognize that there is an imbalance and there's a division within the community, and that this is something that has to be overturned. And the only way to overturn it is by chopping away at that system that oppresses all of us. And again, that goes back to why Huey wasn't really, promoting that there would be a confrontation between nice men and the prison guards for something that he seemed as something really small. Well, and I mean, it wasn't small because it was the quality of the food, and somebody decided they weren't going to just slide somebody's food up under there. But I guess in the big picture of things, it just seemed like it was a small battle. But that was my read that back on page 309. Let's see what Rye had to say. Let me see if I can get your comment, Rye. Yeah, it is that over sensory stuff the cops want to use, punish to get the info confession they want out of you. It isn't just the punishment while you are still behind bars. Yeah, that's absolutely true. There's reasons, but that they use the environments that they use to keep you locked away. And they're not going to paint the insides of a prison with bright colors or anything that's going to positively stimulate your mind, because they are trying to break you. I mean, that's the whole reason for the solitary confinement. It's to break you, because they want to force you into a certain type of submission so that you will play by their rules. So yeah, I unite with what you're saying. Let's see what else we got in chapter 28. So anyways, on page 310, they actually come up with the bail that's set at $50,000. We kind of talked about this before, but of course, it was still a hardship because you have to come up with 10% of the bail. $50,000, that means you have to come up with $5,000. And he says that on page 311, he said they actually had to raise it all. So the Black Panther Party had to raise all that money to get Huey out, the $5,000. So it can be done, y'all. And in the meantime, he's still in the Alameda County Jail while this is all being arranged and while this is all being brought up. But they were able to raise the money. And, he does get ordered to be released. So after the release, the planning almost immediately starts out where they're trying to organize rallies and conventions. And then the community is very much receptive to Huey being let out. He's able to be reunited on page 213 with his sisters Leola, Doris, and Myrtle. His parents have gotten older, sicker by this time, so he does actually reunite with them. I think it was on, let's see. Oh, wow. Well, he is able to reunite with his mother and father. Let's see, I saw the paragraph somewhere and I thought I made a note of it too. But his father is so sick that they don't want Huey to just go and see his father until they're able to kind of prepare him for it, because he is just that weak, that sick. But he does meet with his mother, and he says that it was just a very emotional reunification. On page 2, it's on page 314. It says, my mother was at the hospital. She knew nothing of my release, but Melvin and the others figured she could handle it better than my father. Before I saw her, however, I went to a friend's house and got out of my prison clothes and went to a news conference at Charles Gary's office. So he, let's see, after a little further down, he says, when I left the news conference, I went to the hospital to see my mother. It was a joyous reunion. Later, when my father and I met, he was deeply moved and he wept. He told me he had not expected to live long enough to see me freed from prison. So that was emotional for me, because I think that's something that we think about especially when you're in revolutionary life, when you've decided that you want to walk this walk and you actually want to free your people. You realize that this is a very real potential thing that can happen to you. And when that happens, it's like it scares you. Me having a child of my own, I'm thinking if I'm ever separated, I don't really know how I would deal. But the reunion, and I would just hope that the people that I do this for, or that are related to me, would understand I'm doing this for our people. I'm tired of seeing these conditions for our people. So me doing this isn't just to say fuck the system, as much as it is I want us to be free. And that's what Huey was fighting for, was to be free. So I just hope his family understood that was the reason that all of this was happening, for it was a fight for freedom. Something else at the bottom of page 314 that kind of goes along with the whole stimuli was I had to develop all over again my old reflex actions to avoid being startled or puzzled by certain phenomena. People who have never served time in prison do not realize that a large percentage of their behavior is a conditioned response involving no reasoning process. They instinctively react in the right way because they are used to the familiar patterns in their lives. So much social stimuli and social forces do not baffle them. So yeah, it does mess with your ability to respond to certain things a certain way. And I just thought that was just something that just kind of added on to what we had already read. The chapter ends on page 316, and I had highlighted a couple of things here. And I mean, as soon as he's out, he's getting hit with, we need you to do these interviews, we need you to do that interview, and all this stuff like that, and speaking engagements and everything like that. He said he even received a brochure from some Hollywood outfit. It contained newspaper clippings about me and a letter saying "your star quality" or something like that, which would have been amusing had it not been such an overt capitalist attempt to co-opt the revolution. And I'm glad that he recognized that. I also highlighted the task is to transform society. Only the people can do that. Not heroes, not celebrities, not stars. A star's place is in Hollywood. The revolutionaries' place is in the community with the people. A studio is a place where fiction is made, but the Black Panther Party is out to create nonfiction. We are making revolution. And I think that's one thing for us to remember as revolutionaries and as people in general, colonized people in general, Black people in general, is that, when we are looking, we live in a world where capitalism is pretty much the way of the land. It's the law of the land. And you've got rich people who have platforms, who, we look up to. A lot of them. We love their music. We like Rihanna. We like Beyonce. We like, I don't know, J. Cole. I'm just throwing some names out there. But we all have these people that we relate to them in their music. And as colonized people, we have some of the best forms of art and entertainment and culture and everything like that. So it's very difficult for us to separate sometimes the person from the art. And sometimes it's necessary, not always. But I think that when we look at celebrities to take stands on things, we should understand that it's likely not going to happen because they have cemented their way into that world of a sense of comfort, and they have resources that most of us don't have. And for those people, it's unlikely that they're going to take a stand for the working class because they have already kind of given up their ability to be able to relate to you. They have a few family members that they have taken care of. They've made them comfortable, and their proximity to somebody with lots of money and things of that sort makes it difficult for them to really relate to the average person. They're these people's family members, these celebrities' family members. And so I've found in my time on this planet that it's difficult to see or expect celebrities to take a position of what's right for the people because they're comfortable. They're comfortable in the situation they're in. They have unlimited resources. They're not trying to end their position in what we see. They want to remain in that. So, I'm not saying that they couldn't take a position of nobility and say, I want to do what's right for the people and I actually want the revolution. I'm saying it's less likely to happen, and we shouldn't expect that. But that's just something that I noticed when Huey mentions that at the very end about celebrities and stars and things of that sort, and that I just really don't see that a lot of celebrity and stars, they don't take the positions to transform. And people will say, oh, well, I don't know if it's LeBron James that's supposed to be building a school or something like that, but what is that school going to teach your kids? Is it going to continue to encourage them to stand up and say the Pledge of Allegiance for the American flag? Is it going to continue to teach those kids that their history begins with the transatlantic slave trade? Is it a school that's going to continue to make them just zombie-like believers in the U.S. Constitution? Because if that's the case, that's not doing anything for the Black community except bringing in more slaves for people to continue to think with that mindset. So, celebrities can give tens of thousands of dollars to schools that are failing or whatnot, but you're not willing to share your wealth, your wealth with the community. You're not willing to give up your status as a rich person to benefit the rest of the community. Then you're no better than a white person like Bill Gates who decides, oh, I want to give. And then there's always political reasons behind why they're giving to a certain charity or a certain community, which you should be skeptical of. But that stood out to me at the end. Let me see what you guys have to say. And while we're doing that, make sure that you donate if you can. We have the hashtag, not the hashtag. The Cash App is $BHBookclub. You can donate there. You can also go directly to our website and donate there, www.blackhammer.org/donate. You can also donate at the GoFundMe, which is www.gofundme.com/blackhammerorg. And you can donate at any of those platforms. All donations will be welcome. No amount is too small. But in order for us to get better quality of presentation to you and those types of things, we need resources to come in. So we appreciate any donations you guys can give, and we encourage you to do that. So let's see. So Rise says, and white Western capitalism swells its wallet on marginalized and colonized people. It pushes Black, brown, trans artists onto the street while stealing and streamlining their genre. Absolutely. We've always been the subject of any type of exploitation. Makes sense. They should try to package their activism too. Yeah. And that's what I mean. It's just, I don't really anticipate, these people with unlimited resources who, and I think that's one thing that Huey recognized was that he probably could have become a celebrity, in that, if he wanted to get on all these shows and speak their agenda or become a more liberalized form of what the Black Panther Party really started out being, he could have probably done that and probably could have made a nice little living for himself and his family. And he could have said, well, maybe we're not this militant group of people. Maybe we want to do this, and then just allow them to hijack the movement like they've always done. And Huey refused to do that. And so, and it becomes hard for you to relate to the community. And that's something that he mentioned about privilege, his state of privilege. He's getting out. These other comrades are still going to be here. And you recognize when you feel a little bit more privileged, and you know that what it feels like. It doesn't feel good. And that's just kind of the sense of what celebrities, in my opinion, that's how celebrities move. It's like it's almost impossible for you to relate to the people with your resources, and the fact that you're not willing to use your resources to really give these people autonomy in their own communities. You know, do I think Angela Davis did that? Yeah, I do. As far as what I know about her. Now, there's some things about Angela Davis that I didn't know, and I'll talk about it here in a minute. But yeah, I do think, in a sense, I do think she did that. Sold out, if that's what you mean. So yeah, we can move into chapter. Oh, we got about. Okay, I am moving fast enough. So I'm gonna move into chapter 29, and that's where we're talking about rebuilding, which is an important chapter because Huey wastes no time getting out. Once he's out, he's done. He is going to be retried again for the manslaughter charge, but he's back on the street and finds out his comrades, Bobby Seale and Erica Huggins, are also being arrested. Well, they've been arrested and they're serving time for a murder charge. And the footnote at the bottom of page 317, it says Erica Huggins, the widow of Black Panther John Huggins, also with 8 other Black Panthers, including Bobby Seale, George Sams, Warren Kimbrough, Lonnie McLucas, was charged with murder and conspiracy to commit murder in the killing of New York Black Panther Alex Rackley on May 21st, 1969. Sams and Kimbrough pleaded guilty to murder on the second degree of Rackley and were sentenced to life imprisonment. McLucas was found guilty of conspiracy to commit murder and given a prison term of 12 to 15 years. The trial of Erica Huggins and Bobby Seale was held separately, ending in a hung jury, and the state declined to try them again, dismissing all charges. So that's what ended up happening. But in the meantime, again, like most of these charges are trumped up. Even in the case of Assata Shakur, we saw what we just saw in Huey P. Newton's case, and then these comrades. So they will keep you in prison while they decide whether what's going to be the outcome of your case. So that's really where Huey hits the ground running as soon as getting out, was that he wanted to try to work to get his comrades out and then organize around that. So also he mentions the Soledad brothers, comrades George Jackson, Fleta Drumgo, and John Clochette, who were nearing trial for their lives on a trumped up charge of murdering a prison guard. So a lot of organizing that's going on, and it's just a lot of Black Panther Party members are imprisoned right now. So the need to organize around their imprisonment, to mobilize people around these political happenings that are going on, is necessary. He says that, he was released from prison in August of 1970, and then there was an upcoming session that they were trying to have where I guess the Central Committee at one point had decided, and this is the Central Committee of the Black Panther Party, they wanted to rewrite the Constitution, which Huey had kind of written, had contradictions. He had criticisms of that because he didn't really feel like there was much that writing a new constitution would really do for the Black community, as long as you still are living under the law and land of white power imperialism. But he talks about that, and Eldridge Cleaver is the reason why these conventions were even happening. And he's at this time, it seems that he's in solidarity with the Central Committee of the party. They are actually following his direction. Remember, at this time, Eldridge is now in Algeria, so he's not even in the States anymore. But he is supposedly organizing people in that area to follow the same direction as the Black Panther Party. His wife, Kathleen Cleaver, she was still here in the U.S. and was arranged to speak at several of these different conventions and these different speaking engagements, but there were several times where she did not show up at all to do that. And then, of course, the Black Panther Party is facing other challenges where anywhere they are to go speak, of course, the law enforcement does what they can to keep them from happening. But in Philadelphia, Huey does appear there, and he's able to speak. I had highlighted a couple of notes in his speech. And then of course, the response he had to people speaking to, that he was speaking to, was important. But he says on page 320, thus 200 years later, we have an overdeveloped economy, which is so infused with the need for profit. We have replaced democratic capitalism with bureaucratic capitalism. And I've highlighted that. And if you have a hashtag read that back for this chapter, please put it up, because I would like to discuss it. Then a little further down on page 320, it says generation after generation of the majority group have been born. They have worked and they have seen the fruits of their labor in the life, liberty, and happiness of their children and grandchildren. Generation after generation of Black people in America have been born. They have worked and they have seen the fruits of their labor in life, liberty, and happiness of the children and grandchildren of their oppressors. While their own descendants wallow in the mire of poverty and deprivation, holding only to the hope of change in the future. And I mean, I don't know how much more grave you can get with the reality of what African and colonized children's reality are. Our reality has been in comparison to the oppressor. And just seeing that, I mean, should get the average person up and say, this is, we got to do something. Anyway, so he delivered that speech, but Huey on page 321, he said he's not a really good public speaker, which actually, I don't know if you guys remember when we were reading Assata Shakur, but she actually did have that criticism of Comrade Huey, was that he really wasn't a good public speaker at all. Now, he could write. I mean, he was a great writer, and for him to have been essentially illiterate, at the time that he graduated high school, the fact that he talks in the manner in which he does, and I mean, just even this book, it just seems like he very much overcame that. But I remember Comrade Assata criticizing Huey's ability to speak and relate to the people, really, or I guess just the way in which he would bring about a speech. You just said it was really just what's the word you look for when somebody just has a monotone voice, just really dry, just you really can't hold an audience captive. But he said, I'm not a good public speaker. I tend to lecture and teach rather in a rather dull fashion. But the people were not responding to my ideas, only to an image. And although I was very excited by all the energy and enthusiasm I saw there, I was also disturbed by the lack of serious analytical thought. I'm gonna say I probably can relate to Comrade Huey in that I'm not a really good public speaker either. But, and sometimes you have to have other people that can, really grab the people in a way that they need to be grabbed, because everything that Huey said in that speech was very important. But the fact that he was not able to, I guess, grasp people in that way, and I mean, of course, he's rebuilding the party because he's been away for so long. That probably was something necessary to happen. Anyway, let me see what you guys have to say, what your comments are. Crap, I need my notes. Thought I was about to lose my phone, y'all. That's why I jerked back the way I did. All right, so let me see what you guys have to say. He said, I've always taken Huey as a decent speaker, just willing to take time out to plot what he wants to say. Yeah, and maybe I've just never seen the speaker. I just know that he said that he made the statement that he did, and then of course, like I said, I remember reading from Asada Shakur. She did mention the same. She made the same criticism of Comrade Huey, was that he really wasn't a good speaker. But I have actually heard very few of Huey's speeches. I've read, some of his speeches, and I've seen, I've read on other things, even outside this book, of things that he said. But as far as hearing him speak, I've actually not. Daniel says he gave himself a criticism regarding him speaking. Cleaver sold as well. He became a right-wing supporter and advocate at the end of his life. Yeah, Cleaver's motives became very separated from that of the people and the masses. So, and then we'll see later in this chapter even what the whole reason for Eldridge doing what he did was. But Huey talks a little later on about how they decided that they wanted to create survival programs for the people because, even though they want to overturn this system that is causing, the oppression of the people, they want to feed the people in the meantime, and they want to create survival programs that enable them to do that. So that's where the breakfast, it says the Breakfast for Children program was set up first. So the free breakfast program that we hear so much about from the Black Panther Party, it was a survival program. They also had other programs: clothing distribution centers, liberation schools, housing, prisons, prison projects, and medical centers soon followed. So these were actual programs that they put into place to help the people survive. So they're trying to deal with if any of you guys are familiar with Maslow's hierarchy of needs, the first thing that you have to do in order to get to a psychological well-being is you have to get your basic needs met. So there's no reason in even trying to get psychologically well if you're not eating, if you're not dressed, if you don't have a roof over your head. None of those things at the top will be met, because your basic needs have to be met in order for those other things to follow, emotional needs and so forth. And he uses a really good analogy here too, where he said, it says the programs, they were designed to help the people survive after their consciousness is raised, which is only the first step in the revolution to produce a new America. I frequently use the metaphor of the raft to describe the survival programs. A raft put into disaster during a disaster is a raft put into service during a disaster is not meant to change conditions, but to help one get through a difficult time. During a flood, the raft is a life-saving device, but it is only a means of getting to a higher and safer ground. So it's not meant to change the positions. It's just something there that's helping you to get from one point to another point while you're doing the deed of freeing yourselves. So I thought that was important, and that's likely I don't know that I actually labeled it. Oh, no, I did label something to read that back. Let me see. Give me just a second, y'all, to get to my notes. Yeah, I think that was my read that back was that. How the metaphor or the analogy that he used as far as like the raft. I thought that was important. Do you guys have read that backs for this chapter though? I'm really interested. And then Daniel gave me his. And then Daniel says, true, without your basic needs, you live through depression. Basically, it's like, if you're not able to eat, if you're not able to have a roof over your head, these are things that all living organisms need. They need a habitat, they need food, they need nutrients, they need water. Those are things that we all have to have in order to survive. And unfortunately, in what we see as far as African and colonized people in the U.S. and pretty much everywhere else on the planet, their basic needs are not met. Their housing is not met. Their, access to food. And even if they have access to food, access to quality food is hindered, And so, when those basic needs are met, then you can go into the emotional needs, love and things of that sort, securing having a family unit, and a family unit that has a good dynamic and not a dysfunctional one. Black Power, Cameron. And so, if you don't meet your basic needs, you won't meet any of those other needs, the psychological needs, the emotional needs, and all those other things that follow. That's the first thing you have to do. At the bottom of page 322 talks about deep into the they're talking about the writing of the Constitution. I think this is where Huey begins to kind of be at odds with what's being done here with that. But it says, deep into the violence of the revolution, they wanted the Black Panthers to write a new constitution, overthrow. And he's talking about the white liberals that were basically starting to criticize the Black Panther Party for their position. And they wanted a new constitution to be written. They wanted it to overthrow the government by force and to implement it. And it said, when this did not come about in Washington, we got critical letters claiming that we were no longer the vanguard of the movement. And he said he paid no attention to that. In fact, we were glad to be rid of the radicals because all they did was talk. Those who understood the true nature of the revolution stood with us. So that's already starting to come to a head. And then something else on page 323 that I thought was important was something that Huey said at the bottom of it when he's talking about, there's a new structure that they had brought about in the party called the Ideological Institute, and it came about in December of 1970. He wanted that to train their more advanced comrades, people who have been in the party for a while and in revolutionary life longer, and he wanted to them to observe, it says here on page 323, to observe and divine phenomena along lines set down by the Black Panther Party. So I guess upholding and understanding what kind of shapes what the Black Panther Party is about in the first place. And he said he had thought a good bit. It says, I had thought a good bit about since my release about new ideas and concepts, but I did not want to be, could not be the only one developing ideas and programs. Given the opportunity, other comrades would be able to come up with imaginative programs and fresh solutions as they encountered changing conditions. This is essential for the advance of revolutionary thought. I thought that was important because a lot of grassroots like organizations, the person that usually starts the organization is really thought to be, well, this is the leader of that organization and he has all the ideas. So every idea, and I mean, it's very difficult to operate in that way because you can't have an effective organization if you've got one or two people who are implementing everything. So that's why in Black Hammer, we're all about bringing people in, and we want people's ideas. But we also need people's ability to help us push those ideas into reality. And so that's why I had highlighted that, because I thought it was just really important that Huey and even Malcolm had mentioned it when he was talking about how he didn't even deem himself a leader. But he was instrumental in in coming up with the Organization of Afro-American Unity, but he wasn't even the one that actually wrote that out. That was actually somebody else within the organization that did that. So it's just so important to recognize that, even myself, sometimes I feel inadequate with bringing about new new ideas, or if I have an idea, about actually laying it out as far as how it would come into a reality to make something like that happen. But it's necessary, and that's what we do in Black Hammers. We get people in here, and we really want people to bring their ideas and to help make those ideas a reality, make those programs a reality. But yeah, I appreciate what Huey said about that. Something else that's important here is Huey is having conversations with other people out in the community. There's a person here that's a part of the Black Panther Party, Connie Matthews, who's says she had migrated to Europe, but she came into the U.S. and she actually served as Huey's secretary there. She was actually in Algeria, but I guess Eldridge Cleaver had her to go back to serve in Oakland. and she married another comrade, Michael Setawayo Tabor, and I'm probably messing that name up. He was a Black Panther from New York, and he was one of the 21 defendants in the what Huey says circuit state called conspiracy trial. And there's a footnote at the bottom of page 325 where he talks about on April 2nd, 1969, 21 New York Black Panthers were arrested and charged with conspiring to bomb several New York police stations and department stores and New York Botanical Gardens and the New Haven Railroad. Bail was set at $100,000 each, and the defendant spent 10 months in jail awaiting trial. On May 13, 1971, after a trial that lasted 8 months, the 13 defendants who stood trial, including 2 who fled to Algeria, were unanimously acquitted of all 12 accounts of the indictment. So I think that was something that it's called the New York 21, I think is what they were called. And there was some internal conflict around that group of people within the Black Panther Party. I know that was something that actually was talked about in Assata's autobiography as well. So it says that Huey was meeting with this brother in the community. What was his name? Erickson's his last name. I'm trying to find out. Eric Erickson, and it says he was a professor at Harvard. And Huey starts meeting with them, I guess, to discuss things that affect the Black community. So they're meeting frequently and things like that. And it says that the meetings between Huey and Erickson came to an end after, I guess after these trials. Wow. It says, okay, let me just read this paragraph because I think it's relevant. It says, Setawayo was an effective organizer and a good speaker, but he has suffered through some heavy drug and prison scenes, and he fell completely under Connie's spell. And it says, when the meetings with Erickson came to an end, Connie and Setawayo disappeared, taking many of my personal papers with them. And then, of course, Tabor jumped bail and displaced the other New York 21 in jeopardy. But more than that, I was puzzled about where they would have gone. And then he talks about the reasons for that. So it just seems like there's just a lot of sabotage that seems to be happening. I want to get to the part, because we're kind of running short on time, but I want to get to the point where Huey talks about they're scheduled to go in front of a very widespread media source, and it actually says it in here what that was about. NBC, that's it. So NBC, they're supposed to go in front of them to talk about the Black Panther Party, to answer questions again like they had done before. And Eldridge just fucked everything up. I mean, it was during this interview that he basically said a lot of things about the way the inside. It just to me, it's just the ultimate betrayal. Like, even if you were at odds or were no longer basically in agreement with Black Power Cherish, thank you for joining. Make sure you share if you haven't already. Just if you're at odds with or no longer in agreement with the movement, then why, I don't know why sabotage it. But it says on page 328, well, let me back up a little bit because they start talking about it on pages 326, 327, I believe. Yeah, I mean, I'll just start here on page 327. It says, now in the public setting before thousands of viewers, Eldridge chose to disagree with the actions of the Central Committee. However, he did not attack me. He attacked David Hilliard, the chief of staff. Eldridge accused David of having allowed the party to fall apart and said that we had expelled many loyal comrades without sufficient cause. I disagreed with him and defended David. David had done a good job of sustaining the party while I was in jail, often working with scant support, yet keeping things together from coast to coast. In my opinion, if anyone was at fault, it was me. So, I mean, but again, Huey did not know this was going to happen. So especially not on such a public forum. Like, if this were going to happen, this would have been something that would have happened behind closed doors within the party, not on national television, where that just gives the media, the police, and everybody all this oh, y'all are basically falling apart, and which was an opportune time to send people in to basically destroy the movement. So to me, this highlights the real true reason, which I had not really fully understood before, why Eldridge is considered to be a total like traitor to the movement. Yeah, so after that, of course, things fall apart. Bobby Seale and Erica were released eventually. And Eldridge had even basically sacrificed them up, because they knew that this wasn't going to help with them getting out or getting them free, and he still continued to pull this stunt. And he actually talks about that. I'm trying to see where he actually mentioned it. It says, it soon became clear that Eldridge had organized a plot to subvert the work of the party and sacrifice Bobby and Erica, and this is on page 328, to the establishment. He had done this by questioning party ideology and by attempting to turn a number of Black Panthers against the party and the Central Committee. And it says, immediately after these public charges against Hilliard, the key members in 4 Black Panther branches in New York and the one in New Jersey publicly announced they supported Eldridge and thereby resigned from the party. So it just, wow, that's a lot. And, again, Eldridge is in Algeria, and just basically just did what people do when they're trying to build themselves up and they really have no regard for the full people. So we can really question anything that Eldridge ever contributed to the party, even in a good sense. I mean, Huey always had contradictions about Eldridge Cleaver. He talked about his unwillingness to really work with the party, and even when he was like Minister of Information, he talked about how Eldridge really was very unreliable when it came to submitting articles for the Black Panther newspaper and things of that sort. So all this really came to head, and it really was never about the people when it came to Eldridge Cleaver. Anyways, and then the chapter ends as they go back to discussion around George Jackson, who was murdered in prison. It says 2 days before it was to begin, on August 21st, while attempting to save his brothers in San Quentin cell block from being massacred by guards, he was shot and killed by his enemies. He had fulfilled his own prophecy, which was, I know that they will not be satisfied until they push me out of this existence altogether. So that was on page 330. And it leads us into the last chapter, which is fairly short. But since we're running low on time, one of the things about this chapter that stood out to me was the poem that was written by Huey P. Newton's brother, Melvin, and it was read at the funeral of George Jackson, which was held on, what day was it? They do mention the date in here because I remember reading it. So, but that stood out to me in this chapter. And then, well, I'll do that in a minute. Do you guys have any? Okay, John Jones says Eldridge Cleaver was a deceptive serpent. Well, we have a lot of those that are still among us today. And again, their actions speak louder than what they actually say. So it's very important to know that when somebody's actions are in contradicting what we've either united on or what we are trying to do for the people, then you don't ever forget stuff like that. Sometimes people just make honest mistakes, and sometimes those mistakes are not really mistakes, but they're actual sabotage. So that's what you do. You learn from that. But George Jackson on page 331, chapter 30, the first quote that starts out with, Black Panther is our brother and son, the one who wasn't afraid. And I appreciate that so much, because, you always find people who who aren't afraid, who are angry, justifiably angry at a system that has continuously oppressed people, never ceasing to oppress people. And when those people decide they've had enough and they want to stop the system from doing that, then they're labeled as crazy. They're labeled as mentally ill. They're labeled as violent. They're labeled as somebody who is a terrorist. And we really have to recognize that for what it is. And just the fact that Black Panther had the spirit of people who were going to fight at whatever cost it took to free the people. Black Panther can't possibly be an enemy to the people. It could be an enemy to the state, but it wasn't an enemy to the people. But I also highlighted, this is my read that back for this chapter, but it said George Jackson had genius. Genius is rare enough and should be treasured, but when genius is combined in a Black man with revolutionary passion and vision, the establishment will cut him down. And that's very, very true. You can't be deemed an intellectual when you are trying to go against the state, or when you deem the state as an enemy to the people. Then the people will deem you as something to be feared, and the state will deem you as something to be feared. And it says that Comrade Jackson understood that statement. And I didn't know that Comrade George Jackson had become a member of the Black Panther Party while in prison. And, we have a couple of people in Black Hammer that are as well. And, what we want to do is we want to organize people in the prison, because that's the thing. That's where the people are too. We don't ignore that there's anybody that this system has touched that we don't want to organize for our revolution, for our liberation. But he became a member during the time that he was incarcerated. On page 332, it said, then not long after my arrival, I received through prison grapevine a request for George to join the Black Panther Party. It was readily granted. George was made a member of the People's Revolutionary Army with the rank of General and Field Marshal. For the next 3 years, we were in constant communication by means of messages carried out by friends and lawyers and inmates transferred from one prison to another. So you can still organize no matter where you are. And I mean, if they could do it with paper and pen and people word of mouth going back and forth, then there's no reason why we can't do it today. I did want to read this letter written by Comrade George. I thought it was, I got really emotional reading it. And then also, this is what I was saying earlier when Angela Davis was mentioned. It was that she was mentioned in this letter, but this letter was written on February 21st, 1971. It says, Comrade Huey, things are quiet now. Tonight we have discipline and accord. Tomorrow all may fall apart again, but that's us. I have 2 articles I would like to be put in the paper, one following the other by a week. The one on Angela first. And then if you approve, I would like to contribute something to the paper every week or whenever you have space for me. And so he goes on to talk about that. It was something I wanted to read about what he said. He said, did you know that Angela and I were married a while back? And I almost pulled her all the way into our camp just before Eldridge made that statement. I had done so well, in fact, that CP stands for Communist Party, I believe, tried to cut our contacts for I had done so well that Communist Party tried to cut our contacts, attack my sanity in little whispers and looks in conversing with her, and then cut off my paid subscription to their 2 newspapers. Strange that they would be afraid of the FBI and not afraid of the cat. Perhaps they've reached an understanding, some of them anyway. So there's some names that are left out for certain reasons. There's a book that's mentioned here. It says, in his second book, Blood in My Eye, he expressed his faith. Black Panther Party is the largest and most powerful political force existing outside the establishment politics. It draws power from the people. It is the people's natural political vanguard. But I did not know, I wanted to say about that letter, I did not know that him and Angela Davis were actually married. I had an idea that she had a romantic interest in somebody within the Black Panther Party. She did have ties somehow to the Black Panther Party. I know Comrade Asada did mention Angela Davis in her book, but she was never technically a Black Panther. And I did not know that her and George Jackson were married. I had no idea of that until I read this letter. Okay, so George's funeral was actually held in Oakland on August the 28th. I thought it was very interesting. What stood out to me about his funeral was that George Jackson said he did not want flowers at his funeral. He wanted shotguns at his funeral, and so the Panthers showed up, and they were dressed with their arms on them. I thought that was dope as fuck. And I'm sorry, I'm trying not to cuss. And then also the Father Neil was the person who, I guess, proceeded over the funeral. He said, he made a short and powerful statement. The lesson of George Jackson's death, that Black people would have to get off their knees. Take note, please. Lesson of George Jackson's death, that Black people would have to get off their knees and take their destiny into their own hands. Bobby read some of the many messages from around the world. Elaine Brown saying, "One time's too much to tell any man that he's not free." I didn't know much about Elaine Brown either. I didn't know she had a leadership role, and she actually helped cover the party in Huey's absence. But I thought that was pretty dope too. And Huey was the one that actually developed the eulogy, and he kind of talks about that here. But I really wanted to end today, and he ends the eulogy with all power to people. I really wanted to read the poem that was written by Huey P. Newton's brother, Melvin Newton. He said, "We called him the General. The sky is blue. Today is clear and sunny. The house that George once lived in headed for the grave, while the panther spoke of the spirit. I saw a man move cat-like across the rooftops, glide along the horizon, casting no shadow, only chains into the sea. Casting chains into the sea. Using his calloused hands." You know, you get calloused hands when you work with them. "And broken feet to smash and kick down the barriers. The angels say his name is George Lester Jackson, El General. All the people went home to their hovels. He to the world of gods, heroes, tall men, giants. He went like a crushing wind in rolling tide. The thunders roared, the lightning flashed, smashing all challengers and devils in his path, while caressing the leaves, sand, and sky." And what that said to me, how it spoke to me, was that he didn't die a pointless death. And I think, of course, the name of this book is Revolutionary Suicide. And Huey wanted to underline that George Jackson's death was not a reactionary suicide. It was a revolutionary suicide. And the fact that he died with the dignity that he did, fighting for his people, serving his people, and that's what it said to me. He went to the world of gods, heroes, tall men, giants. He went like the rushing wind and rolling tide, the thunder's roar. So he didn't go out quietly. He didn't go out in vain. His death was that of a revolutionary, and he had a revolutionary death. And his death was so noble that we should all take note of it and follow his example. It's just that poem just means so much to me. So I wanted to end our discussion today with that, but I would like to see if you guys had any. Jamal says, "Do you sis say that shit? Fuck the tone, police." You know what? And the only reason why I was just trying to be careful was because as much as I want to get this out as much as possible, and there's restrictions on you being able to do that when you say certain things in your videos. So I mean, I'm like that too. I cuss like a sailor, but yeah, that's the only reason I'm trying to be careful. And then Rye says the poem is a beautiful power, and I agree, Rye. That poem did something to me. And I really cannot wait to hear, to read, and maybe that's something we can read in this Revolutionary Book Club, is Blood in My Eye. And I also would love to read Soledad Brothers. because I've never read that one before. I don't know nearly as much about George Jackson as I really wish I did, but I do intend to be reading that book soon. But y'all, we only have 2 more chapters in this book. We've got chapter 31 and 32. And I'm hoping that my comrade Dia will be back with me next week, and there we will release the next book that we'll be reading. So I'm excited to do that. Also, if you've not yet become a member of Black Hammer, I mean, you should. Like I said, when you join Black Hammer, you're joining an organization that is in the community. We lead our own shit. We are an organization of African and colonized people, period. There are no exceptions. If you are African and colonized, you can join this organization and you can get to work. We have committees where you can put your labor and talents to. It doesn't matter what your workforce or what your work field is. You need to join Black Hammer and use your talent, your labor, your intellect, and feed it back to your people. I mean, there's really no way around that. So if you haven't joined yet, you should go to www.blackhammer.org/sign-up. That should be a link that's also in the comments already. So follow that link. You can also email me. Personally, I don't mind giving my email address. It's raspberrybrown7@gmail.com. And raspberry is spelled RHASPBERRY brown7@gmail.com. So if you're interested in joining, hit me up. You can also go to our website, sign up there. We will be in contact with you within a certain time after your sign up. And don't forget about the food drives that I mentioned. Don't forget about the Protect Our Girls protest that we're having on the 18th. Also, the 18th is a Monday, if I'm not mistaken. And the 17th is a Sunday. And that's when the food drive in the Wilmington, Delaware area will be held. So donate to the BH food drive for that one. For the one that's going to happen in Atlanta on November the 30th at Central Park, you can donate at blackhammer.org. The Cash App is $blackhammer.org. You can donate there. We're trying to raise $200 there. The other food drive in Wilmington, Delaware, they're trying to raise $200 as well. So no amount is too small. Also, if you want to help those 2 little girls that we are trying to protest for in Decatur, Alabama, you can donate to the Protect Our Girls Cash App, which is $Ballantine Children. Ballantine Children, not Valentine like Valentine's Day. Ballantine, BALENTINE children, and it's all together. But all the links should be in the comment section. I look forward to going over these next 2 chapters in the book and finishing up Revolutionary Suicide with you all. I look forward to us being able to announce the next book. If you guys still have comments even after the fact, please put them in the comments, because we can still discuss. We can still respond to your comments. But share it wherever you can. And y'all are great. And so see y'all next week. Black Power, and join Black Hammer.